Hmm. I look a mess. This is gonna be weird. Getting back into the swing of things. Hello, internet. My name is James, and this is Macabre Manscape, my music-based um, channel, primarily heavy metal. It's been almost 3 years since I filmed or uploaded anything, and that's for a multitude of reasons. At the time, this was 2022, by the way, March. I had just got a new job. My computer was on the decline. Still, to this day, haven't really bothered to replace it. That's fine. In the new year, hopefully. But moving on, I've noticed everyone doing their end of year best heavy metal albums of 2024. All those listicles that I enjoyed watching, even though I don't have nearly the same taste as any of these people. And that's fine. So instead, because I don't listen to enough new music to do really a top 10, I'm just doing a discussion, just a review of the music that came out in 2024, of specifically things that I've purchased. So even though I have listened to more albums, like here I have my pile of 26 albums. I have purchased 4 others. They have not arrived yet, but I will not really be talking about those either, just because they haven't come in and I won't have anything to show for it. Though I will probably do some small little mentions of them here and there. So yeah, if you included the 4 that are on their way or have yet to be shipped, that is 30 albums this year that I have purchased, which is actually a high number for me. But it still isn't, it's not enough for me to even consider doing a top 10 list. It's just not a big enough sample size. That being said, of course, well, these are the things I like thought worthy of purchasing. Though, of course I listened to like the new Deicide, and I checked out this new 6 Feet Under, and that fucking sucked, and the new Dark Tranquility, which I thought was pretty okay. But that's neither here nor there. So I have divided my 26 album pile into 4 little subgroups, and I'm going to discuss them in chronological order, in order of release. And let's get on to it, right? I want to start with the miscellaneous heavy metal stuff, things that are not specifically, they just don't really fit in the other categories. And this is going to be, first one is, the glare is going to be obnoxious. This is Old Eyes Nude Heart by Matter Mortem, released on Dark Essence Records on January 26, 2024. They are a Norwegian progressive metal band. They started off back in the day as like an atmospheric doom gothic metal project along the same lines as things like The Gathering, like Mandillion, or Tristania, but with none of that harsh vocal kind of none of the harsh vocals that really made Tristania's sound at the time, right? They have since gone on to be more of just a proggy doom alternative, just heavy atmospheric, like it's all over the place. They don't really rely on keyboards for that atmosphere, really. It's more in the quiet nature of like melodic clean guitars that they have come in. This album is their this is their 8th outing, released really early on into the year, and it is truthfully a continuation of their later sound, just again. So even though it is like a strong collection of music, it is not doing anything new for them or for like their sound at large in heavy metal. Like, they have made their niche at this point and they're just sticking with it. So though it is good, they have done the same thing, just better in the past. Like, my favorite albums of theirs are still 9 Ways, 8th Way. Fuck. Oof. Titles. Hold on. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. 8 Ways, Desiderata, and Deadlands. Oof. They're right behind me. But yeah, still a strong album. It's just, I've heard this before. Next is Infected Rain's Time. This is their 5th full-length album, released February 9th on Napalm Records. I was really into this band when they were still independent. I purchased their first 2 albums together from their own online store back in 2014. Yes, 2014. And this was, I had to wait for their first album to come back into print. So I bought them around the same time when their second album came out. And I still really like those albums. This band is, they started off as more of a new wave new metal revival act. Their first album, or their first EP had like DJ scratches, record scratches, and stuff like that, and rapping, and stuff that they've really started to wean off of. This, by the time this comes out, they're still living in that kind of groovy new metal-ish sound, but bringing a lot of those modern metal core kind of sounds. This was actually a little bit of a disappointment to me. This was, I remember last year I went to go see Lacuna Coil and the Birthday Massacre in San Jose, and that show was either the same day or the same week that the lead single from this album dropped, and that was Dying Light. And I remember that single hitting so fucking hard. Like, I loved it. That like keyboard lead was, I remember it being much more prominent. Like, my memory of what that song sounded like and listening to it on the album is way different. And ultimately, the downfall that I see with this album is that it seems to be going for mood rather than songcraft. So they're definitely going for a vibe-based listen, and I just am not picking up what they're laying down with this one. So hopefully the next one that comes out after this is Wins Me Over Again, because the album that came out before this, Ecdysis, in 2022, I remember like it just is so good. From what I remember, it's been a hot minute, but I loved that album, and this just didn't do it for me. Next up is a curveball, because I'm not much of a death metal person, but this is Lifeless Birth by Necrot. They are an Oakland-based death metal band, so they're local to me. I'm sitting in my San Francisco apartment on a dreary Saturday, so, they're across the bay. And actually, this was a Christmas gift from my older brother. Let's get a look at that. That's rad. Look at the artwork on that. So this is really just heavy, like just old school death metal. Not many frills. That being said, like, they have some melody work on here, some leads, and some like more melodious, groovy riffage that I appreciate. That being said, I'm not really an old school death metal person. I have my few bands that I like. I enjoyed, I like Deicide, and I like Massacre, I believe is their first album. But it's not really a sound that I gravitate towards, so I'm just not a big death metal person. That being said, like, it is cool. I can put it on and enjoy it. It is, I think this album, the one flaw is it is too long. It is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tracks and 40 minutes long. There's no reason why a death metal track needs to be 6 minutes long, especially if it's just death metal, nothing melodic, nothing technical, nothing progressive. If it's not, like, realistically, they should be in and out in 3.5 minutes at most. So the fact that this is kind of, like, it kind of drags its feet a little bit. That being said, I recognize that it's been on some people's top, death metal of 2024's list. I'm just not really a death metal person. Next up is Fire by Kitty, released on Sumerian Records June 21st. And this album was one of my most anticipated releases of this year, and it did not disappoint, or it did, right? Yes, it did not disappoint. Pretty sure I got that right. It is just, it's pretty par for the course for a Kitty record at this point. This is their 7th full-length album, after, and their first one after a long break. Just look at that. I fuck with the art style. The art direction on this album is so good. Anyways, so it is pretty much a continuation of their last 2 albums, I Failed You and In the Black. Groovy, melodic, heavy as all hell. This one does tend to be a little hooky, but I say that not as a negative thing, because I feel like listening back on some of those earlier Kitty albums, they're just sometimes was a lack of like a hook or something to really hang your hat on. So this is just chock full of catchy songs, epic choruses, just big sounds, gutturals, super clean, just heavy. So again, so if you liked In the Black or I Failed You, this is a continuation of that, a little bit more maybe accessible because it is so catchy, but also just the sound quality on it is so good. It just sounds bigger than those albums. So this was a great listen. Loved this album. I should probably listen to it more. Next up in my miscellaneous metal pile is Abyss by Ad Infinitum. Now, this was going to go into a different stack, and I'll get to that stack later, but it no longer really applies to that stack. This is just miscellaneous, right? So Ad Infinitum used to be, they're a Swiss-based symphonic metal band. Well, they used to be. This band is interesting. I kind of got the feeling pretty early on that this band only really exists to sell records, or maybe the members formed this band just as an easy way to get like a record deal, and then from there they could like figure out what they wanted to do, because they started off as a symphonic metal band. Their first album dropped in 2020, I believe, right before the pandemic, or right at the end, or whatever, somewhere during the pandemic. And it's a very accessible poppy symphonic metal sound, and slowly they weaned out of that. That's fine, but the thing is, at the time, 2019, 2018, 2020, symphonic metal was really big. It still is, but like was the number one quickest way to guarantee a really easy fan base, because there is such a community of it online. It's such an accessible genre. A lot of young people really like symphonic metal, so it's just like a never-ending supply of fans. That being said, their first album was pretty good, and I have the second one. I didn't buy the third one, and over the course of their career, they've gotten progressively less symphonic until you come to Abyss. Their fourth album, released on Napalm Records, probably said it was released November 11th. I didn't mention that before. And this guy is not my cup of tea. They are one of those bands that basically, they want to be either Bring Me the Horizon or Spirit Box or both. And nothing against those two bands. I like some Spirit Box stuff, and I've enjoyed some Bring Me the Horizon stuff, but it's just, it feels so hollow. It feels just such a like a commercially based move. Like, they were symphonic metal when symphonic was super huge, and then as that like modern metalcore groove metal sound became more popular with electronics, they just kind of shifted gears into that. And so, if I'm being honest, I have not yet listened to this all the way through. I have not yet listened to this all the way through. I just can't bring myself to do it. It lacks an identity. It needs to decide if it wants to be metalcore, poppy, alt rock. It's just not. This was not my thing. And the last record on my miscellaneous pile is the Last Will and Testament. Oh, fuck. Last Will and Testament by Opeth, released November 22nd on Reigning Phoenix Music. That's the album cover. This was cool. I'm not a huge Opeth fan. I have one more Opeth album, their debut. So I have their debut and I have their most recent. And listening to this, it made me realize I need to listen to Opeth more. Like, I enjoyed this album, and I'm really curious to see what else they have done in the past. Though I do think this is not an amazing album. Nothing released this year really struck me as like a 10 out of 10, really amazing listening experience. Just because of the way that I kind of think about music. And anyways, it was a good year in terms of volume and solid like quality releases, but I was never completely blown away by anything. This album is really cool. And it does make me realize that I am missing out on Opeth, and there's another legacy band in my pile coming up that I feel the same way about. So I will probably spend next year checking in on Opeth and listening to their back catalog. And I do appreciate this. It is just not near my top anything. But so cool. Mellotron, I love Mellotron. Very proggy, bringing those death, Growl's Back, which apparently is their first one in years, their first album in years that has that, and it's an interesting sound. It's definitely the type of progressive metal that I tend to like, which is just kind of ill-defined, has a bunch of influences from a lot of different places. It doesn't necessarily have that like quote-unquote prog sound, because I find that stuff to be really irritating. But yeah, I'm excited to see not necessarily what this band does next, though I will check that out when that comes, out in a few years. But I want to really go back and try to like learn that back catalog. Okay, now we're to the second pile, which is new Gothic metal. For those of you who are new and don't know, or people that were subscribed to me before and are checking back in and don't remember, Gothic metal is my it is my genre. It's the thing that has my heart. It pains me that it's kind of a dead genre. That being said, though, 2024 is a good year for it. I only have a pile of 7 releases, though. Let's see, of the 4 that I said haven't come in, I believe 3 of them would have gone into this, so this would have been a stack of 10, and there's even more that came out that I listened to, maybe didn't buy, didn't jive with, but it is out there. So let's start with my second legacy band that I mentioned. This is My Dying Bride with their, who knows, their fucktillionth album, Immortal Binding. I have always been really open about the fact that I don't really love the Peaceville 3, Anathema, Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride. For the longest time, the only one I really liked was Anathema, and then My Dying Bride, Paradise Lost always alternated being the one that I couldn't stand. Now, I'm coming around. I get it. So as an album, I enjoyed this, right? It came out on April 19th on Nuclear Blast. And this is, again, it's a solid album. I enjoyed it from start to finish. I am more likely now to check out their back catalog, especially the stuff from the 90s. Once you get into the 2000s, in general, Gothic metal from the 2000s, if it's not female-fronted, I tend to kind of lose interest, but I'm definitely intrigued by this band now in a way that I never was before. I have also their debut album, As the Flower Withers, and then I have this one, their most recent. But yeah, just really cool Gothic Death Doom, more of a Gothic Doom album than necessarily a Death Doom one, just because it doesn't have that like death metal influence that much, or even have that like cold sterility that a lot of Death Doom tended to have back in the days, especially the kind of sound that a band like My Dying Bride innovated. But it was a really cool album, and I'm glad I took this chance on it. And of course, at this point, I will take a moment to mention the other band that would have come, around about, with this that I would have talked about is, I believe it's called Forever Burning by High Parasite. It is a side project of Aaron Thorpe, whatever. It's a side project. It's very fun, like 2000s style Gothic metal, and I do have that on order. It's just the CDs are delayed. But that was good fun. Like, it's a really fun album, but I don't have enough insight on it right now, because usually I would listen to them a few times, buy it, and then after getting it, listen to it more. Because I didn't actually receive it, I have nothing to say about it. But pending. It should be coming in the next couple weeks. But yeah, My Dying Bride. Next up is Trail of Tears, Winds of Disdain. Ooh, the sun's coming out. Oh, so nice. Actually, I could probably show you guys my San Francisco apartment. Outside you can actually see the sun now. Oh, over in the distance you can still see the clouds. Anyway, my next album on my Gothic metal pile is Winds of Disdain by Trail of Tears. This is an EP, 4 tracks. This was released May 24th by The Circle of Music. And this is Trail of Tears' comeback release. So they released their last album, Oscillation, in 2013, an album that I really didn't listen to. It didn't really get my attention. And then they broke up shortly thereafter, but they are a band that I really, really like. Sometimes their sound can be a bit abrasive and hard to access, but once you're in, you're in. They've always been really high quality. Gothic, symphonic, extreme metal, always bringing in, early on they brought more of the doom metal influence for their gothic metal sound, and then as they've reached into the late 90s and early 2000s, they had a lot more black metal influence, and then they had a few albums with more melodic death metal sound. My favorite album of theirs, of course, being Bloodstained Endurance, which kind of takes out a lot of that extreme metal sound and is just like a really heavy, straightforward gothic symphonic metal album. Great. Anyways, this is their comeback with Aileen, who used to be the lead singer of Sirenia. This is now, she's now in this band, and she's the female vocalist. Tommy Torsten, I think is his name, is the vocalist, and the growler, and he sounds actually kind of almost better. I always had a hard time with his like timbre as a growler in previous releases, but this is super great. I just wish the songwriting is super solid. I just wish the production was a bit cleaner. It sounds very reverb heavy and just kind of cheap. So hopefully in the future, if they do continue, if they put out a full-length album, hopefully the production value is just better. And yeah, but super solid release. I'm very excited for this band. Next up is Running Christ Pro Christo. This album, I realize, has been kind of divisive among heavy metal listeners. I really enjoyed this album, and you might be wondering, why is this in your gothic metal pile? Well, one, because Rotting Christ has done gothic metal in the past, but two, it is kind of slow, middle-paced, melodic-ish black metal with large portions of it being sung by choirs. Essentially, if this was released under Tristania's name, or even like Trail of Tears' name, there would be no question. They would have just pushed it under gothic metal. So it's going into the gothic metal pile. It's my list. Fuck you. It's just big. It's definitely, they're going for a vibe, and even though I said that for Infected Rain, I did not like the vibe they're going for, I didn't like that it was more vibe than substance, this is a vibe that I fuck with, and then also just the meter of the harsh vocals and the way it intertwines with the choirs and the more symphonic elements, it just gives me something that makes me happy. So this is actually a contender for probably one of my favorite albums of the year. But yes, I only listened to it a few times, but it definitely made an impact, and I love the direction that Rotting Christ is going in for the last, I also have the Heretics, very similar vibe, but that has a bit more folk influence. This drops a lot of that, and it's more, leans on those orthodox kind of sounds. So, great sound, love this album. Next up is an album that I was very looking forward to, very much so, I was looking forward to, and did it deliver? Not necessarily. It's not a bad album, but it's not as good as I would have liked it to be, and that is The Black Swan by Disnaden. This was released September 13th on Elevate Records. This band is an Italian melodic gothic groove metal band. Their earlier stuff was marketed as a gothic melodic death metal sound. Whether or not it actually was melodic death metal, is up to debate, but they were a Beauty and the Beast style band that was a bit speedier and a bit more straightforward and heavy than their Norwegian kind of counterparts, right? So this album, I was looking forward to it so much because this is their first one in 12 years, and this is definitely, it does a lot of the same things that their earlier stuff does, while also there's some big differences here. Mainly, the thing that it does that is the same is that it is heavy, it is pretty quick-paced and groovy, has a nice, just driving kind of rhythm, and then they have, the more subtle flourishes of, the keyboards and the synth kind of effects to give that the gothic feel. And it's really big, grand, and epic in terms of vocal delivery. That being said, the vocals are the main thing that has changed. Previously, this was a Beauty and the Beast band. Now that Beast portion has vanished. So what we're left with is a very clean vocal fronted sound. which would be fine. It would be fine if they didn't try to like make an ersatz harsh vocal, where the lead vocal, who I believe, what's her name? Ooh, let me double check. This is not good. Laura, where Laura kind of does these like yelly kind of vocals to make up for growls on certain songs, and it can come off as kind of annoying, especially because they put this like weird vocal filter on it to make it sound like it was recorded through like a telephone. Whatever. The songs that are great on this album are really strong. The others are just kind of middling. So in the grand scheme of things, it might be their weakest album, but it is still an enjoyable album if you're into that sound. Moving on. Next up is Never Never Land by Unto Others. This was a album that a lot of people were looking forward to. I saw them live 2022, I think, when they opened for Behemoth and Arch Enemy, and Nuclear, oh my god, Napalm Death was on that tour too. It was an interesting bill. They opened. This is heavy metal, goth rock fusion, gothic metal. It's fine. Like, I enjoyed it. It's playful, but it's very derivative. Like, you listen to it and go, like, that sounds like Him. That sounds like Typo Negative. That sounds like The Sisters of Mercy. That sounds like The Cure. That sounds like Typo Negative. That sounds, you know, it sounds like Him. And it's, for the most part, played very straight. Some of the songs are a bit more playful in a way that I don't care for. So this was definitely a mixed bag for me. Oh, and since I missed it, I'm sorry. This was released September 20th on Century Media. It was not my favorite, but they're also not my favorite band. This is not the time for it. Moving on. Next up is Shining by Swallow the Sun. And you might be thinking, isn't that a Death Doom band? Mostly, yes. But because it is an album that, you know, it definitely has that Death Doom kind of bass, but it definitely brings that modern metal kind of production and sound, and those symphonic elements. So if you have that Doom, you know, bass, and then add all that the frills to it, and then make it more commercially accessible and poppy, you definitely just get a gothic doom metal album that leans more commercial. But I really enjoyed this album, and I didn't understand the amount of kind of contention that it caused among fans. And then I listened to Moonflowers, and that's also coming. I ordered that too, and it's a much better album. That being said, it's kind of hard to compare those because they are just so different in delivery. But overall, I really enjoyed this album, and I'm going to probably look into Swallow the Sun more in the upcoming year. So that's fun. And the last of my new gothic metal pile is Sub Rosa in Aeternum by Tribulation, released on November 1st by Century Media. This album is interesting because it is produced like a heavy metal record. It is written like a heavy metal record, but the music is mostly goth rock. So this band basically has made that transition from death metal to goth rock, and it's good. I'm just gonna say it's good. It's good. It's just that I don't like that like fake goth rock cadence. Like, he's trying to sound like Andrew Eldritch. But it is a catchy as hell record. It's just so cool to listen to that kind of sound. It's been a while since I've heard one of those records where it's like goth rock but produced like a heavy metal record. Such a Theater of Tragedy and oh my god, what's their name? Sentence did something similar back in the day. But overall, it is a good record. It's super catchy. It just is also very derivative. And yeah, there's my list of new gothic metal releases. Okay, my next pile is really short. It's only 2 albums, and that is not metal stuff. No metal. And that's going to start with Ali X, Girl with No Face. Ooh, got some water on that. I've been having a little sip. And this is This was released on February 23rd by Twin Music Inc. And this is very different. Actually, this is my album of the year. Just putting it out there. It's fun. It's very modern sensibility, but it is a huge send up to 80s new wave, dark wave, synth pop. It's so cool. It's very clever. It's just so much fun, but definitely has a 2020s sensibility to it. But yeah, just great. She has a great voice. The production work, she did most of it herself until the very end. It's just so good and really catchy, and I recommend everyone listen to it at least once. And then the other non-metal album that I got this year is Billie Eilish Hit Me Hard and Soft, released on Interscope/Dark Room on May 17th. And this album, very alternative pop. It's kind of all over the place. It's it's an eclectic assortment of music. There's some synthier bits, some indie rock bits, and it's very twee kind of acoustic strumming and then just kind of singing over it. It is an album that feels like it emotionally needed to be made, but it's not really like an amazing pop record. It's cool to listen to, but it's not super catchy. It's not going to hook you that much. That being said, of course, there are some very catchy songs on it, but it just doesn't really feel like that big, mesmerizing pop extravaganza album that I would have assumed it would be. But of course, in that like down-tuned, like just low energy sound that Billie Eilish is known for. Anyways, now we're getting into my last pile. I need to speed this up because this is going really long. And we're going to start with Leah. The last pile is new symphonic metal. So I'm putting this to the end. It's the biggest pile, and it's the stuff that the more hardcore heavy metal guys aren't going to care about. So you can click off now, but I'm going to talk about it. I have Glory in the Fallen by Leah, released February 16th on Ex Cathedra, which is her own label. I was contemplating to help crowdfund this album. However, at the time, I just didn't really have the money. And because I previously helped crowdfund the second album, King and Queens, from 2015, released 2015, and then also The Quest from 2018. I believe I think I also helped crowdfund that one. And I was going to do the same here, but I decided not to because you actually save money if you don't help crowdfund and just buy a copy of it afterwards. Anyways, Leah is a Canadian symphonic fantasy, folky, atmospheric, did I say that already? Whatever, metal singer. Her stuff used to be much more folky. Now it leans heavily more into twinkly, kind of magical fantasy aesthetics rather than folk ones. That being said, she still uses folk instrumentation. It just doesn't feel like a folk metal project anymore. It's good. I enjoyed it, but the songs don't hit the way I would like them to. They sounded very samey and just not as epic as I would hope. That being said, I do love the way that she incorporates her symphonic elements into her hard rock and heavy metal. I think she's one of the better artists right now doing that sound in terms of incorporating those two worlds. But I digress. Next up is Leaves Eyes, Myths of Fate, released March 22nd by AFM Records. This is a band that I used to be a huge fan of. I actually was going through their older stuff this year and having myself a little Leaves Eyes kick. But after Liv Christine was fired from the band, I kind of had very little interest in their new stuff until I was reading a book and decided to listen to it on the train going to work. And it's fine. It's a very catchy, very commercially viable record. It's definitely better than the stuff I'd heard out there from the last two album cycles. The only problem is, one, the production. It sounds quite nice, but it sounds very synthetic. And then also the vocal performance of the main singer. I don't really know her name. I think her name is Elena. Don't quote me on that. She just sounds so tired throughout this entire record. Like she's struggling in pain to sing these songs. So yeah, it was just something that caught me off guard. So like overall, it is a good album. But I think I'm a little too loyal to their previous incarnations to really give myself over to their later stuff. So I don't know if I'll listen to the next one, but this was pretty decent. Next is an album I don't really have much to say about. I think I have more to say about the record label itself, and I will save that for a different video. But this is Annette Olson's Rapture, her third album, and the second one to be heavy metal and on this record label and in this incarnation. This was released May 10th on Frontiers. This is pretty... it's okay. I find listening to this album really exhausting only because it just weighs on you so much. It's just so much stimulus. It's like a slog to get through, and they're good songs. It's just, I think it's just too much. It's just everything's too forward. So it's a little hard to listen to, but Annette gives a good performance. This just goes to every single time Annette Olson releases music with a different band or her own stuff, I'm always like, it's proof that she can sing on metal and be good. Nightwish was just misusing her. Yeah, moving on. Next is Elvalon, Ascending in Synergy, by released on Napalm Records on May 17th. This is, I believe they're a German symphonic metal band. I remember liking their first album quite a bit. It's symphonic metal. Like, it's female-fronted symphonic metal. My one gripe about this album is that it leans too much on the legacy of Nightwish, specifically the Dark Passion Play and Imagineerum albums. It just seems like it lifts a lot of ideas from that. So if you like those two albums, you definitely love this record. I don't love that sound necessarily, so this was just kind of like, it's good. It's catchy. It's an enjoyable listening experience, but I don't think it's necessarily for me. Next up is A Fortress Called Home by Seven Spires, also released on Frontiers Records on June 21st. This album is being praised to the moon and back on Symphonic Metal Reddit, on just Symphonic Metal anything, really. It has struck a chord with people. They love it. Symphonic Metal fans who want something a little bit heavier love this album. It feels elevated, sophisticated. It's super ambitious. It's this like symphonic metal album that has a lot of power and black metal influences and a really progressive tone. And it's really ambitious on the face of it. However, it kind of hits sometimes. The songs are not fully realized. I feel like there's a lot of production and a lot of cool musical writing ideas on this album, and the vocalists and just everyone on this album is a great just performer. It's just missing a little something. I need a little bit better resolution. I just need a better way in. But yeah, so like, it's really interesting. I recommend the album. No, like, just straight up, just check it out. It just didn't really land with me. It has tons of guest vocals and background vocals and stuff. I would just like to point out the Alessandro Conti makes a guest appearance on the first real track and the closer, and he makes those parts of the songs almost unlistenable or garbage, and they're so pitch corrected. It's hard to note. It's hard to like ignore it. But yeah, so like, it's a cool album. It's still pretty strong. It's just I'm not going to be blown away by it. It's just missing something. Next up is Pirates 2 Armada by Visions of Atlantis. I'm actually wearing my Visions of Atlantis shirt today. This is really fun. Just symphonic power metal. Leans definitely more symphonic than power. And they've just been continuing their thing. So this is chapter 2 of their previous album that came out 2022, I believe. I think that Pirates album was stronger than this. That being said, it's still pretty damn good. They just seem like to be, having like a really good, strong moment in the zeitgeist. And it's really good, just poppy, not that poppy, but like hooky symphonic metal. I don't love the Pirates theme of it. And I wish that the vocalists had a little bit more interplay, but the melodies that they're singing and the band is just, they're just hitting it hard, just fast and speedy and powerful. And the symphonic orchestration arrangements on both of the Pirates albums were done by some new guy. Like, it wasn't their previous producer or their previous arranger, and I think he just breathes a lot of life into this band. And they're again, it's just a good meshing of that symphonic and heavy metal sound, so really cool. Next is Dark Paradise by Imperia. These symphonic metal veterans have been going on for 20 years now. This is their, let's see, 7th album. Had to count in my head really quick. It's definitely not as heavy as previous outings, but it is also kind of more pleasing to listen to. That being said, like, it definitely needs a little bit of grit, and so when you finally get that on the form of harsh vocals on Soldiers of Hell, it's definitely like a relief of like, yes, because there's so much going on musically in this album. But it does sound a little too smooth. So there's a lot of folk instrumentation, especially like Western, Asian, Eastern European, even some Northern European kind of musical quirks in this album, but it could use a little bit more heft. But yeah, so in general, there's some, like, it's a really strong album. There's some small vocal things that are kind of weird, and of course Imperia has always been that way. Imperia is a band with a lot of personality, and it's because their singer Helena Eden Mikkelsen has a lot of personality in her voice, and some of those kind of really big personality moments that work really well on previous outings kind of miss here, and actually they're just kind of misused, and they've just become less strong as, you know, people age and their voices change. But in general, it's a really easy kind of listening symphonic metal album, and not too long. That's another thing that made previous albums of theirs kind of hard to get through, is just the length. This comes in less than 50 minutes, so short and sweet. Next is Simone Simon's Vermilion, released on Nuclear Blast on August 23rd. This album was kind of marketed as a Simone Simon's solo project. It's under her name, however, it feels more like an Adian Lucassen project, and I don't really love a lot of his stuff, so it is proggy symphonic metal, with some like industrial elements here and there, not a ton, but here and there, and it's just different. It's a bit headier than the Epica stuff. Epica, though, is pretty progressive in their own right. They definitely go for that big chorus, that big hook, just that epic feeling, and this feels a bit spacier. It just also means that it doesn't come off as like really well written songs in a way that I really would like it to. That being said, though, the vocal stuff that Simone Simons pulls off in this album is so good, in a way that she's using stuff that you wouldn't know would be in her arsenal listening to just Epica, because they never give her the opportunity to do it. But the way that she will like layer and layer vocals of herself to make that choir sound, which is, you know, other bands have done that, but Simone Simons has just never been in one of those bands that has done that, and just the way that her vocal layers blend so perfectly. So good. Anyways, next up is Nightwish with their most recent album. I believe this is their 9th or 10th album. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is their 10th album, Yesterwind. And this is actually the first Nightwish album in 20 years that I've enjoyed fully, like actually enjoyed. Not just like, it's fine, but like, this is a really good album. One of their best, probably even better than Once, which was again released in 2004. It just is a great culmination of their career. And if they do decide to call it quits, because I know that they're not going to tour with this album, they might take a really big break in between this one and the next one, if there even is a next one. The fact that they ended it here, I think, is a good place to call it quits. It is just a good wrap-up of their career. It's not overly long, it's not overly annoying, it's not overly bombastic. It definitely has some heft, and it's just enjoyable in a way that I did not anticipate So, biggest surprise of the year, I guess, is that I enjoyed Yesterwind by Nightwish. Ooh. Sorry about that. I almost dropped the whole stack of CDs. So, we're going to breeze on by. I need to wrap this up. This is going too long. I have 2 EPs, both released in November. I have Delane's Dance with the Devil and Xandria's Universal Tales, both released on Napalm Records. This was released on the 8th of November, and this was released on the 22nd. And I have the feeling that they were released because these 2 bands basically only go on tour with each other nowadays, and they are having a co-headline tour, I think, planned for next year. And so they have some new music coming out, and they're both quite short, or at least in terms of new music. This guy, Universal Tales, is 4 new songs, and then an acoustic version of a song off their previous album. And then this is 2 new songs, and then a recorded version of an older song, and some live tracks. And in general, they are strong listening experiences, very poppy symphonic metal, lots of fun, lots of energy. I will say that Universal Tales is the stronger collection of music. Delane, their 2 new songs are pretty good, and the re-recorded version of Sleepwalker's Dream is also pretty good, but it gets bogged down by the live tracks, because I know why they're there. It's because otherwise it would be really short and it wouldn't be worth releasing an EP. So they put the live tracks on there to beef up the runtime. The problem is that we need to stop pitch correcting live recordings, please, for the love of God. If she's missing the notes live, just let her hit the notes on the recording. I'm sure it wasn't that bad. Just, you can tell, like, you can hear it. It's the pitch correction is insane. Please stop. But either way, the new material is pretty damn good. It's just that neither of these singers are as strong as the previous, releases or previous singers that these bands have had. So they look good for the future. These, I think for these bands, the future looks good, but their singers are not that strong. Anyways, that's the end of it. That's my 2024 in review. Of course, I could have talked about more, but this video is already so long, and I don't really want to... No. I don't want to drag this out any longer. Anyways, so thanks for watching. This is my first time back. This was a little weird talking to the camera again after so long being gone, and hopefully this sounds good. This sounds okay. But yeah, thank you, and I hope I can post again soon. Have a good one, everyone.